welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 253 for the 25th of August, 2013. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. And that little rattle you heard in the background was Fred the cat. Hello, Fred. Coming up on this week's show, we speak to Julie Lada, the Skeptical Vet. Now, we spoke to Julie a couple of years ago when she was living on the island of St. Kitts, studying to be a vet. Well, she's almost there. She's almost there, and she's going to fill us in on her progress over the last few years. Has she encountered any woo-woo? Has she encountered any mystical or magical thinking in her training to be a vet? Find out at the top of the show. After that, it's a week in science from the Royal Institution of Australia and Dr. Paul Willis. Week in science. I wonder what's been happening this week in science. And after that, Maynard's spooky action with the final of his three-part series interviewing Marlowe Cassetti, who worked for NASA for many years. Marlowe's going to give his thoughts on the so-called moon landing hoax, and boy, does he have a zinger, a real zinger, as to why the moon landing almost certainly happened. And to round off the show, we're going to have the audio of a video tribute to Dr. Eugenie Scott. Now, Dr. Scott was inducted into the IIG, the Independent Investigations Group's Hall of Fame in Hollywood, California, not so long ago. And we must thank IIG and John Rail for the use of this audio clip. At the end of the show, you'll be hearing about Eugenie Scott. And I've noticed, I've been looking at the calendar, and I've noticed that next week the Skeptic Zone turns 5 years old. I can't believe it. 5 years old. 5 years ago, the Skeptic Zone was launched at Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia. Sorry I can't be there this year. It would be fun to be there for the 5th anniversary of the Skeptic Zone. And I think the only reason the Skeptic Zone has been going for so long is because of the very generous contributions by listeners just like you. If you want to chip in for the Skeptic Zone, only costs less than $1 a week. Head to www.skepticzone.tv and you too can chip in to help the Skeptic Zone carry on. Now, it's come to my attention that one of my favourite shows from when I was growing up, The Curiosity Show, and I'm sure many of my Australian listeners will remember The Curiosity Show. You can now see a lot of The Curiosity Show on YouTube. In fact, The Curiosity Show has its own YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and then Curiosity Show, one word, and you'll find out more. Or you could look at the show notes for this episode. The Curiosity Show, what a great show that was. And you can even buy the DVD set from The Curiosity Show. I thoroughly recommend it. And coming up soon for those people in Victoria, in Melbourne, and down on the peninsula there, I'll be speaking at the Mordialloc Sporting Club on Tuesday, the 3rd of September, from 7:30 p.m. And if you want to attend my talk, Looking into the Mind of the True Believers, the best thing to do would be to go to the Australian Skeptics website, skeptics.com.au, and click the link for Richard Saunders' talk. You have to sort of go through the meetup page and get your tickets that way. It's only $4, and I might even go myself. I've always wanted to hear this guy talk. Anyway, more information at skeptics.com.au. And for Sydney people, stay tuned on the Skeptics website, the Australian Skeptics website, for news about an upcoming visit from Dr. Pamela Gay. We hope to have details very soon. A visit by Dr. Pamela Gay, the wonderful, famous astronomer. All right, well, it's time for me to run downstairs, open up the pantry and look for tuna curry. Oh, yes, tuna curry. I can taste it now. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now all the way from beautiful Illinois, a state that I must visit one day. It's our old friend, the skeptical vet, we might say, Julie Lada. Hello, Julie.
Hi.
Hi. Now, it's been a while since we've spoken to you on the Skeptic Zone, and I think the last time I spoke to you, you were in that romantic paradise of St. Kitts. How did that all go?
That went beautifully, and I miss it terribly. It's weird when you get homesick for an island that you lived on for 2.5 years, but I am.
Well, I remember seeing some of the photographs you were posting from St. Kitts. It did look like a tropical paradise with you in many a swimming pool, I seem to remember.
Swimming pool, ocean, just all over.
Now, of course, you went to St. Kitts to follow your dream, I guess it was, which is to become a vet. And I understand quite a lot of people do a similar sort of thing. St. Kitts is quite famous for its veterinary students, I understand.
Yeah, RiAus students are really well known. We particularly tend to perform very well in clinics. So we do the 3 years of our kind of lecture-based didactic learning, and then we do a year of clinical education. And we're pretty well known for rocking clinics. And so far, that's been my experience. I've been doing fairly well in my clinical rotations. And I was really scared when I started that I was going to be kind of shown up by the Illinois students and made to look a fool. But no, I'm keeping up fairly well and holding up my end, so it's turned out well.
So this is your 4th year now. You're a 4th-year veterinary student. You must have had some interesting experiences, to say the least, along the way in those years, looking at all sorts of animals.
Yeah, one of the really cool things being down in St. Kitts is RiAus had a kind of partnership with the local farmers. They have a breed of sheep down there called the Barbados black-belly sheep, and it's a hair sheep instead of a wool sheep. So they're produced for meat. And we had a farmer that we would partner with where we would take a herd of his sheep for a semester, and we would do very, very minor procedures on them. And then during that time, we were also feeding them and getting them fat. And so it was kind of an exchange where we'll fatten up your sheep if you'll let our students practice on them, and then you can have them back before they go to slaughter. So it's actually a really cool kind of arrangement they have going on.
It seems like it's a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Yeah, it was kind of sad because, we named our sheep. He was Carl.
Oh, no.
He came whenever he saw us. We'd just say his name, and he'd come running over to us. And it was kind of like having a little dog that was going to become mutton. But
well, to be indelicate, you're absolutely right. I guess that's what was coming. That was going to be happening. Now, what about other animals? Let's think about the more common animals you'd associate with a vet in a city, for example. Cats and dogs and rabbits and budgies and parrots and all that sort of thing. How do you get along with those animals?
I get along with them very, very well. I have 3 cats of my own, and I grew up with dogs. I love exotics. I have a leopard gecko. I used to own rats. I fostered for an exotic rescue for 7 years. So I've had every kind of lizard, snake, creepy crawly thing through my house that you can think of, except for spiders, because my husband would never come down off the furniture. But I get along with pretty much everything. Well,
I guess you'd have to, if you really do want to be a vet. You wouldn't want to have a phobia against animals, that's for sure.
Well, there's some people who really don't like certain species, and they have that option that they never have to practice on them after vet school. You do have to be a jack of all trades while you're in vet school and do everything. But after vet school, you can go, I'm only going to do cats. And there are people who do feline-only practice or equine-only practice, and all they see is horses. So you have that option once you graduate.
I'm glad to hear it. I think I'd have to specialize on pussycats myself. I'm quite attached to the ones that run around this house.
Yeah, I that's a little limited for me.
What's your favorite animal, then? Of all the animals that you've dealt with, examined, looked at, pushed, prodded, and probed, do you have one that you particularly like or you'd particularly like to treat?
I love rats.
Rats.
I love them. They're like little dogs. I just love them. I can't have them, unfortunately. My husband's really, really, really allergic.
Oh.
Yeah, we found that out when he moved in with me when we were engaged. But with a HEPA filter and an extra bedroom, we managed to make it work until they went on their way.
Yeah.
But I love rats. I really like lizards. I have a leopard gecko tattooed on my foot, so I'd better like them. And cats. I mean, I have 3 cats, so obviously I really like cats.
And has it been much what you would expect when you started on this amazing adventure to become a vet? Or has the study been more arduous, or has it been much more difficult than you would have imagined?
Oh my goodness. I never anticipated in my wildest dreams that it would be this difficult. Especially subjects like virology, where, human virology, you're studying human virology. It's one species, and there's obviously a number of viruses that we can become infected with and get sick. But when you compare that to all the viruses that a dog can get, a cat can get, a horse can get, a cow can get, just across the board, it's so intense and it's so difficult. I don't know how to describe it other than it's very arduous and scary.
Wow. Would it be easier just to become a human doctor?
I don't want to say that. I won't say that. We kind of have this joking kind of, I don't know, we give each other a hard time. MDs and DVMs, we kind of give each other a hard time. But when we're in school, at least, I don't know about once you're out in the world and you're actually practicing. But, there's this thing that we like to say in vet med where we say real doctors treat more than one species.
Oh.
So, it's good natured. It's all in good fun. But, yeah, we do kind of like to give them a ribbing every once in a while.
Now, and we might have discussed this a couple of years ago, but and of course you had a couple more years since then, both in St. Kitts and where you are at the moment. What woo, for lack of a better word, have you come across in your work, or superstitions or misconceptions?
Oh, Lord. So I know last time I was on the show, we talked about applied kinesiology and my experiences with that. So that was definitely woo-tastic. But the crazy thing about vet med is that it's very accepted.
Right.
And acupuncture and chiropractic are huge in vet med. And it's been kind of an interesting experience for me, because if you're skeptical of those things and you're critical of those things, you kind of automatically get labeled as inflexible and a bit of a hard nose.
Wow.
And I've always considered myself a very pleasant, nice person, but I developed a bit of a reputation. And I just found out recently, so we go to RiAus for 2.5 years on the island, and then we come here for a year. And you get paired up with people who you weren't necessarily like super close with in your class and so the 5 of us came here, and one of whom was someone who I knew but I didn't know very well. And she told me that she never really got to know me while we were in St. Kitts, even though we sort of ran in the same circles, because she was afraid of me.
Wow, I can't imagine that, Julie. You're such a lovely person. I just can't imagine that.
I was pretty shocked too. I was just like, I didn't think I was scary. And it's because she's she does believe in acupuncture, and she's a Reiki person.
Oh dear. I see.
Yeah, but she's a lovely girl, and I really like her, and we get along, and we go to dinner and out to drinks all the time, and so we get along just fine. I think she was afraid I was going to bite her head off, and it's a professional courtesy thing where you kind of have to go, okay, well, I don't believe in this. I'm not really going to budge on that. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with it for your comfort, but I'm not going to sit there and harass you about it either. I'm not going to change your mind by yelling at you.
I think that's the right attitude to have, because you won't, but absolutely not. But Reiki I haven't heard of, but I'm not surprised that some people out there are using it for pets. Even in the vet local to me, just around the corner, which my pussycats go to, there's a sign there saying acupuncture available, and I made the mistake of once questioning that to a vet who was there, and yeah, they weren't very impressed. But still, you know, there's a point where I guess even as skeptics, you just got to let things slide a little bit and bite your tongue.
Well, we did have a conversation just the other night, actually, about she is very much the sort of vet who is going to offer traditional, or I don't want to say traditional because then you get into traditional Chinese medicine, evidence-based medicine.
Right.
She's going to practice the best standard of care as far as our current scientific knowledge is concerned. And she's also going to offer these other services. So I couldn't really... I do have a concern if it's a monetary issue. Money comes up a lot in vet med, where the owners say, I have X amount of dollars to spend, or I'm tapped out, we can't do anymore, this is the end of the road. And they might reach that point sooner if they're spending money on acupuncture as well as antibiotics. So I kind of have an issue with it, but as long as she's willing to offer best practices first, as a first line of treatment, and then this is a kind of adjunct, then I have less of a problem with it.
An interesting dilemma, and I'm sure you're going to find this throughout your career.
Yeah, and you kind of have to choose your battles.
Yes, that's a very good point. You will have to choose your battles. Now, you've put in my mind the image of a poor little cat there on the examining table and somebody waving their hands, channeling the Reiki energy into the cat. Oh, dear. And the cat looking up going, what are you doing? What? All cats are skeptic by nature, I think.
Very much so. They're skeptical about you. They're skeptical about their new food, pretty much everything.
I think you're right. Now, how long to go before you get that magic certificate, or the what a vet gets over there? I'm not terribly sure.
So I am going to be taking my NAVLE. Oh Lord, let me see if I can remember. North American Veterinary Licensing Exam. Be sure that, because at first I thought it was like National American, and that made no sense. I believe it's North American Veterinary Licensing Exam, and I'm taking that in November. So it's coming up very soon. It's about 600 multiple choice questions. A very, very long exam covering dog, cat, horse, cow, and some of your exotic species like birds and reptiles. It's pretty intense. It's pass, fail, you become a doctor, you don't. And
wow. Oh, that's exciting. What are you doing talking to me? You should be studying.
Yeah, I've bought like an online mock exam thing that you can use. I've bought a couple of review books, and it's going to be crunch time from now until November.
Well, that's great. You know what, Julie? I think in the future, the way technology is going, when a couple of years down the track, I'll be able to have a consultation with you for my pussycats or whatever animal I have, all virtual. I'll put the cat there, and you'll see it on your virtual screen, and you'll be able to recommend the best treatment for it. I'd look forward to that.
Oh no, the physical exam is key. You've got to get your hands on the animal. It doesn't work that way.
And do you enjoy just interacting with animals? I think you must be the sort of person who would.
Yeah. It's funny because it never wears off. You know, every little girl wants to be a veterinarian when she's young. It's just like the horsies and the kitties, and you know, you kind of lose your mind, and that never goes away. You know, I still, to this day, if I see a horse, I'll squeal, horsey, and run up and start petting it, and I still devolve into like an 8-year-old little girl. I'm
not surprised. Well, look, Julie, I don't know whether to wish you luck or not in a couple of months. I don't think you'll need it. I think you'll be a splendid vet, and I look forward to chatting to you afterwards. Maybe this time next year, and we can catch up and see how you're going.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Julie, look, I'm so pleased that you have taken up this path in life, because I think it's wonderful that bright people like you follow medicine and veterinary medicine. That's just fantastic. Evidence-based, and you'll be able to help out a lot of people and a lot of animals. So, Julie Lada, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here's a message from our friends at 60 Second Science, the wonderful outreach opportunity getting students and others to make science documentaries all in 60 seconds. 60 Second Science is interested in getting more teachers involved in places like Canada, the United States, United Kingdom, anywhere, really. If you're a teacher and you want to become involved in helping to spread science on the internet, Google 60 Second Science, have a look at some of the entries, and maybe get your school board interested in this wonderful idea.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science news you need to know. This Week in Science saw a closer look at paper pulp, howling wolves, and what's this noise? Can the twinkle twinkle of little stars really tell us what they are? Nature this week reported that the flicker of stars can be used to measure gravity at its surface. In turn, this information can be used to determine how big and how old the star is. The flickers have also been converted to sound, so you can hear what a star looks like. Let's have a listen. Why do wolves howl? Researchers looked at the social structure of wolf packs and measured levels of the stress hormone cortisol. When an individual was removed from the pack, they observed the howling of the wolves left behind. They found that wolves howl more if they have a strong relationship with the removed pack member, but that it did not relate to their stress levels. This indicates that howling is not a simple stress response, but may be used more to communicate with the missing pack member. You're listening to A Week in Science from RiAus, and now 4 science headlines in 30 seconds. A closer look at paper pulp reveals why it sticks together and how to reduce the materials and energy needed to produce it. Middle-aged people with narrowed arteries who have had the flu jab have almost half the risk of heart attack. Floods due to climate change in coastal cities will cost at least $1 trillion annually by 2050. And what you see is what you get. We rely more on visual information when judging a musical performance than sound. It's been a big week in science policy, with announcements for investment in regenerative medicine and climate change. On Tuesday night, the 27th of August, join our discussion on science policy, held simultaneously in Adelaide and Canberra and available live online across the country. Check our website for details. That's it for this A Week in Science. I'll see you back here next week.
Podcast Science is an award-winning weekly science show in French hosted by a bunch of crazy enthusiasts. We are convinced that the greatest ideas in science are quite easy to grasp as long as they're presented with passion, using a vocabulary common to all curious minds, whatever their academic background, if any. You don't understand French yet? Well, it's never too late. All our stories have a written transcript on the website, and people from all around the world are using our content to learn Molière's language. Our topics range from zero to infinity, from evolution to artificial life, from electromagnetism to the science of introverts. We just love mathematics, science, critical thinking. So do you? Want to join? You can subscribe to the podcast for free from our website, podcastscience.fm, that's in one word. You also find us on iTunes and SoundCloud. See you soon, hopefully. Hâte de vous accueillir. À bientôt sur Podcast Science.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Marlowe Cassetti, as a guy working at NASA in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you, all the photos I've seen, you must have had one hell of a pocket protector for your pens.
I never had a pocket protector. I abhorred them, but I had a lot of ruined shirts, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, because every guy you see had in the mission controller seemed to have a huge pocket, even bigger than the Revenge of the Nerds movie, just huge. Did pens leak really easily then? Was that the problem? Or were they using fountain pens or something?
I think we were away from fountain pens. By that time, the ballpoint pens were pretty much in use.
And we'll just run through a couple of the conspiracies here. Now, you said you spoke to some people from the Club of Rome. Did they look like people that run the world, Marlowe?
Well, actually, they were circumstances was I got a phone call. At that time, this was in the 1982 time period. I was the project manager for trying to figure out how the Air Force could plan missions and fly missions from Colorado Springs in something called the Consolidated Space Operations Center. And my job was to take our knowledge of what the systems were. We had the Mission Control Center in Houston, and replicate that if we could or whatever. And so I got a call from somebody high up in the organization, said, there's a few gentlemen from the Club of Rome that would like a briefing on how the Air Force is going to do this. So I said, I got briefing charts and everything. Just tell me where to go, and I'll give them a briefing. There were, I believe, 4 members. One of them was a retired Air Force general. The other one was a retired military, I can't remember which. And the other 2 gentlemen were bankers. I didn't know really what the Club of Rome was. I guess in the back of my mind, I just figured, I don't know what I figured at the time, but I was doing my duty and laid down the charts. They asked questions, and I think they were rather pleased. Gave them probably about a 1-hour comprehensive briefing. They had questions, but I think I was able to satisfy most of their questions.
There was no hidden agenda going on there, was there? They weren't trying to put people into space or use this as some sort of weapon, were they?
I don't think it was for themselves. I think they were. I never really understood why they wanted to know that, why they wanted to hear how it was going to be done. I suspect, since there was a general in the group, an Air Force general, by the way, it may have been conceived by him. The Club of Rome was meeting out in a place called the Woodlands outside of Houston, and it was, maybe an hour drive from there to the Space Center. So maybe he just said, well, I'm getting bored with whatever's going on. I hear the Air Force is going to do something with the shuttle. Why don't we go find out? And maybe the 4 of them piled in the car, and they set up the meeting. I think it was maybe a non-sinister. I think it was pretty okay kind of thing.
What about the moon landing hoax? You mentioned earlier that there was intense competition with the Soviets. Is there any chance that maybe, you guys did all this work, but rather than risk the astronauts, they faked it somehow just to beat the Soviets that way?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Soviet Union, who had a great deal of capability, I mean, we're talking about a country, an organization that had the Manhattan Project secrets before anybody else did.
That's true.
They went in and infiltrated the program, and they were learning about the Manhattan Project as it was going on.
That's right. So Stalin knew about it at the Potsdam conference before anyone told him.
Yeah. Truman was surprised that he wasn't surprised. He said,
yeah, well, whatever.
Whatever, yeah, whatever. So anyway, just that fact itself. But I'll tell you the thing that I always point out is when you talk about moon landing conspiracies, there is a sizable portion of people around the world that believe it was a hoax, or either, if they don't believe it, they're very suspicious that we landed there. In the United States, the polls I've seen is that somewhere around 9% of the population thinks that it's a hoax. There's another 10%, maybe 15% or so that are very skeptical about, they can't say that it's a hoax, but they don't believe we may have really done it, but they're... And by the way, one of the astronaut trainees, a guy named Brian O'Leary, was in the fourth group of astronauts. He later left the program, and he contended that, he was pretty sure that we faked it. And also, former President Bill Clinton, in his memoirs, said when he was a young man, he bought the story that we flew to the moon and landed there, but after he became, as a wiser older man, as he became president and saw how the government worked, he was not sure at all that we landed, that it was maybe hoaxed.
So do you think this is people looking back at the technology and saying, no, that couldn't have worked? Or do you think it's people having their genuine mistrust of government?
I think, yes, that is it. And also, one of the things you mentioned is that it's such a hard thing to do, it might have been easier to fake it. Well, my contention is, going back to the words of President Kennedy, he says, we're going to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think that's kind of the fallacy there. I have my own personal thought about the how the moon landing hoax got started. You want to hear my story?
Yeah, sure. But see, also to add to it is the fact that we've never been back.
Well, that's we were talking about budgets and money availability. That's one of the big reasons why we haven't been back.
Well, what's your personal theory on how the hoax got going?
Okay. So here I am. I'm in Mission Control Center. I watched the landing. I hear the voice loops and everything. And during the landing, my job was to solve a problem that the lunar module was overweight and underperforming. And I did analysis that said, no, that's not correct. We have plenty of performance. So I was particularly interested in the descent of the lunar stage onto the lunar module onto the lunar surface. Now, Buzz and Neil were in the module, and Neil Armstrong was the pilot. He had the controls, and Buzz was basically calling off numbers and altitude and speed and so forth. When he got to the prescribed landing site, he saw boulders there that were pretty large, and he described them in real time as saying, hey, there's boulders as big as Volkswagens. I'm going to have to land further downrange, which he did. But it takes more fuel to land going out there. And the low-level sensor came on, and they gave him a call. You got 60 seconds of fuel remaining. Well, to me, as an observer, it seemed like that came on too early by maybe 30 seconds. So after it landed, and he landed successfully, I went back to the office, got my team together, and we said, I said, I got this feeling it just came on too early. Well, we kind of kicked it around and talked to some of the experts and everything. We kind of felt like, well, it was maybe a dispersion of some type. But lo and behold, the same thing happened on Apollo 12. And the culprit was not anything that was obvious until tests were run on the tanks in a simulation of zero gravity, and they realized that the baffles in the tank didn't keep the fuel from sloshing around. It was accentuated by the 1/6 gravity, and consequently, the sloshing of the tanks uncovered the low-level sensor. I'm sure you've seen people have experienced this in their cars when the buzzer goes off or whatever to warn you you're getting close to getting out of gas. So my thought is if a conspiracy happened and it was all simulated and all the data that we were getting back, since we were in on the conspiracy, they simulated something that really took us several missions to figure it out. So they not only fooled us, they also employed the world's best psychics to say, I foresee fuel sloshing that these guys are not aware of that's going to make the low-level light come on early.
So this also means that the famous story of Armstrong almost running out of fuel is incorrect. He had 30 seconds more than he thought he had. Exactly.
But it was something that we had to correct. It did happen on Apollo 11 and 12. The other thing to go along with the hoax theory is the next day back in the office, a couple of the guys that worked for me went over to the press center. Now, imagine this. We got this big auditorium. It is crammed with reporters from the television, radio, print media. We have famous luminaries in the journalism world. Norman Mailer, the famous author, he was there. So they go over there and they come back to the office and they said, your people think that this was all done in Hollywood and that this crappy video that we saw last night was done in Hollywood and that it's all been fake. And I said, what do you mean by my people? And they said, the Italian press corps. And I said, they're not my people. But anyway, and then when I realized it, that crappy video, slow scan, black and white, low resolution, I mean, when you see it, you can't even make out what the hell it is. And this was real-time video. And by the way, Maynard, interesting factor, we almost didn't take that real-time video camera on the lunar module with us.
Well, because of weight concerns?
There was a weight concern. Of course, I had solved the weight concern, but even with the weight concern, when you put a piece of equipment like a video camera on the spacecraft, then you've got to go through all kinds of training hours and write procedures on how do you hook the thing up. I mean, you just can't have a piece of equipment that they've never seen before, never pointed, and so forth. And the people that wanted to not fly it said it's just a big hassle. It doesn't enhance the mission. It doesn't. There's no mission objectives to say you need to broadcast real time back to Earth, and yet it was recommended that it be left off. My boss's boss, Chris Kraft, who was the flight director in charge of flight operations, he said, I can't believe what I'm hearing. Why would we leave it off? Because it's like having a camera, a TV camera or a movie film camera on the beach when Columbus stepped foot in the New World.
And the still photos from the Hasselblad are fascinating. It is weird that some of the cross-hatching appears above the images or behind the images sometimes. I think that's an odd one.
Well, that is very explainable in photography, and it has to do with dynamic range of the photos. But and I've seen this proven where you take a very bright object and it almost looks like the cross-hatching. I mean, it's been simulated, and it's and of course those 70 millimeter format Hasselblad cameras were top dollar, top of the line.
Oh, beautiful cameras!
Beautiful cameras, and they brought back beautiful images. But there's a whole mystique build up about why the letter C is on the rock, and it's a hair. It's somebody's eyebrow hair that got into the film processing.
Marlowe, how do you feel about this as someone who worked on the space program where you mention that and every once in a while someone comes up to you and pushes the hoax conspiracy theory, the hoax theory to you? How do you feel?
Well, invasion of Normandy was, I'm sure for the guys that were involved in that, was a big emotional thing in their life that probably really defined their life. Now, if I were to go around and say, it turned out that the Brits and the Americans made a deal with the Germans that we're just going to pretend and we're going to set up a film crew and nobody was going to get hurt and we're just going to trade them more gold blocks or, whatever. And then you came out with Normandy invasion, a hoax. I mean, people would be coming at you with hatchets if you were to propose that.
And that's the feeling that many people involved at NASA would have had.
Yeah, and it's really smart people said, "Boy, I saw this program on TV. That moon landing was all fake. They got proof, photography proof, and everything."
And at Marlowe Cassetti, this also brings us into your journey through skepticism and critical thinking and how you're trying to spread it around your area. What is your view on getting people to look for the evidence, basically, when something happens?
Well, I had the great opportunity last year to give the commencement day address to the graduating high school in my community, and I gave them. I put a flavor of the space program in, and the whole thing was about critical thinking. And I give an example of how we flew to the moon on Apollo 8, and we were getting pushed off course, and we used detective work and looked for evidence, and we realized that when we flushed the toilet, it threw us off course because it gave us a slight push. No. And I ended that by saying, it took critical thinking and looking for evidence to find that. And I contrasted it by saying what we didn't do is we didn't call in a tarot card reader to figure out where we were going to end up at the end of this mission, or we didn't call the psychic hotline, or we didn't even do something as simple as looking up the astrology charts for the 3 crew members that were on and try to figure out what was going on. Because critical thinking is the opposite of magical thinking. And what I described was magical, and give that contrast. And I went through other things about medicines and how the father of our country died and so forth and so on, to give examples of how critical thinking can affect what's going on.
And like myself, you also enjoy non-skeptical podcasts as well, and you like a whole range of things, don't you?
I do. I don't spend my whole day listening to podcasts, but I live on 75 acres of land, so I got a lot of work to do.
You got a lot of. You must have a hell of a ride on mower.
Well, I do have a riding. I have what's called a garden tractor, which is like a big mowing machine.
Has it got a cup holder? Have you got a cup holder on your garden tractor?
No, it's too bumpy a ride. I mean, I'm running over kind of wild fields and so forth, and I just keep it trimmed down around the house.
Well, and is there one image, like a lot of people that have been involved in dramatic programs like you've been, they've got the one photo that is somewhere in the house that reminds them of their entire time. What is your photo that reminds you of your entire time in the space program? Mercury
Flight 10, MA-10, lifting off. I've got a black and white photo of that. And I also have, I guess my prized possession is during kind of the last part of the space program after we had flown Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and were getting into shuttle. I was given an award certificate, and on it was a flag, a small fabric flag that was flown to the moon on Apollo 17, and that's hanging in my living room.
That sounds like quite an honour. You weren't one of the lucky people to get any bit of moon rock, were you?
No, and that is kind of a bone of contention about.
Oh, here we go. Let me someone stole your bit of moon rock. Someone.
No. I was first to go into the facility. I knew a friend that worked over there, and he snuck me into the lunar receiving laboratory, and I got a glance at that. But he was very nervous about it. I wasn't supposed to be in there, so he ran me right out. But in the lobby of one of our buildings there at Johnson Space Center in Houston is a pretty good-sized moon rock on display behind a plexiglass cube. And it's really just fascinating me, and feel that I contributed to that.
Yeah, I can understand that feeling. Look, Marlowe Cassetti, I could just imagine you walk past that rock and you go, "Yep, I helped get that bit here."
Yeah.
And when you look at the advances that have been made and what you could do now with the technology now, do you ever imagine what could have been done then if we had the computing power we have now?
Oh, it would be. I mean, we had a division of 400 people that probably could be done by 40 people with the computing power. It's very difficult. And I gave a talk at a Engineering Scholarship Foundation banquet, and there were a lot of young people there, and I tried to give them a flavor of how crude computing was in that era of the Apollo program. When you have a big computer, and the only way you can talk to that computer is you take a box of IBM cards with punched information on it, you submit it, and you pick up the printout the next morning because it's been waiting with 100 other jobs. You don't get a lot done. You do a lot of waiting and a lot of busy work, but you don't have instant access that you have on, let's say, a PC nowadays. Advanced calculations that I know took 20 minutes of time on a big machine. It's a fraction of a second on a desktop computer.
Look, Marlowe Cassetti, thank you for telling us about your time with Mercury, Gemini, and the Apollo program. Do you have a website or some way people can contact or find out more about what you've got up to?
No, actually, I don't.
You really should, even if just a couple of your photos and a bit of a blog or something. People would love to read that.
Well, maybe I'll do that, and I'll let you know if I ever get to it.
Well, you've got 78 acres to mow for a start.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've been involved in radio control model airplanes, and our club has a site, but you're not going to find out much about me on that site.
Well, look, you might as well give us that so we can see what other aeronautics you've been doing lately.
Okay, you could look on fcrcc.blogspot.com.
That website again for the listeners?
fcrcc.blogspot.com.
Look, Marlowe, it's been a great pleasure talking to you today about critical thinking, skepticism, and about your experience in aeronautics and NASA. And I'd love to chat to you again because we didn't even get to the fact that you helped design the tail for the Hawker Harrier jump jet.
Well, it was I was redesigned the horizontal tail because it had a stability problem.
See, and that's the kind of people that listen to our show, people. Marlowe, we'll have a chat about that another day. Thank you very much. I will be in contact. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, sir.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Hello, this is Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid Podcast, announcing a new book capturing 50 of the very best stories the Skeptoid Podcast has explored. Are you better able to make good decisions about your life when you know the science underlying the way the world really works? Are you excited to learn new facts, new history, and gain improved insight and context for what we experience? This book is for you. Skeptoid 5, Massacres, Monsters, and Miracles, is a collection of 50 of the best episodes of the Skeptoid podcast, adapted for print. It will be fully indexed and referenced, but most of all, each of its 50 chapters will be a fascinating peek behind the urban legends we've all heard to see what's truly going on. More than 180,000 people enjoy the podcast each week, but many more are missing out, in part because they read books instead of listening to the internet. This project is being crowdfunded on Kickstarter, the web's leading crowdfunding resource. A pledge of $25 will get you an autographed copy of the book, and a pledge of only $10 will get you ebooks to read on your portable device. Also, one lucky supporter will have the chance to write the foreword for the book. Will this be your opportunity to get into worldwide print? Come to Skeptoid.com and click on the project, front and center on the webpage. You can also find it at Kickstarter.com. Just search for Skeptoid. Massacres, Monsters, and Miracles, coming soon to all who make a modest pledge. I'm Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com.
Are you aware that in the last 20 years we have not had a section on intelligent design or creationism?
That's correct. What you are discussing now is whether you will teach the denigration of evolution, which is a long-time creationist strategy to promote creationism through the back door.
Have there ever been any evidence of evolutionary fraud?
Of course.
Should we be allowed to teach that as examples of bad science?
Certainly. Just like you can teach examples of political chicanery.
Thank you.
In the battle for rationality in America, especially in American education, my own subject of evolutionary biology is in the front-line trench. And Dr. Scott is the commanding officer, the master strategist on our side, the general in charge of intelligence and strategic planning, as well as the field officer in charge of tactics and battle order. Yet she does it all with a most unmilitary grace and charm. It's impossible to meet Jeannie without loving her, whether you agree with her or not.
Intelligent design makes the claim that there are things out there in nature that are just categorically unexplainable by natural cause. Therefore, they were created, designed by an intelligent agent, and nobody's fooled, the intelligent agent is God. Now, how can you call that a science when your basic organizing principle is we can't explain this through natural cause? What science does is explain things through natural cause. And the whole idea of intelligent design just completely flies in the face of that.
When I heard that a Scot was being inducted into the IIG, I was very excited. I mean, all the times that you've saved the Enterprise and worked with Kirk and Bones, and it's really a fantastic... What? No. Oh, Eugenie Scott. Oh, even better. Oh my gosh, actually a real hero of mine. I've been at a number of conventions where Genie's talking. It's always been such a pleasure. So, congratulations.
It has been my great fortune and pleasure to have known Eugenie Scott for, I guess, about 10 years now. And I'm delighted that she's been awarded and given such recognition for her work. Congratulations, Eugenie.
I can't think of anyone that deserves to be inducted into a Hall of Honor more than you. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all of the work that you've done.
Eugenie Scott, a named conjurer, and I'm a conjurer, so I'm going to do that. Congratulations, and it's well-deserved.
Eugenie Scott is just a wonderful, perfect person. She is, even though she's well-known, so I think she's still an unsung hero because she is my idol as the right way of being a good skeptic and a good educator.
I know that if NCSC hadn't been around these 20 years or so, the situation would be a lot worse because, frankly, we are effective. The creationists will tell you that. This is the best job I've ever had. No question about it. I got the best job in the world.
Have you heard the one about how the Illuminati, in conjunction with the US government, are hiding the existence of aliens in order to ensure the supply of helium is kept low? Or that the CIA, the militant wing of the Freemasons, are working with the Elders of Zion to take control of the population of the world through fluoridated chemtrails? Canberra Skeptics Incorporated, on behalf of the Shadow Government, will be massing an array of dark forces for the Australian Skeptics National Convention 2013. This convention has conspired to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, possibly the most famous conspiracy theory of all time. If you've ever wanted to learn about the truth behind the death of JFK, what makes for a good conspiracy theory and why they are so prevalent, Canberra Skeptics invites you to attend. That is, of course, should you choose to accept it. Come to nationalskepticsconvention.org and just remember, they will be watching you.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, the Skeptic Zone next week will be coming to you from Melbourne, Victoria. I'll be flying down there very soon, spending some time with those great people down in Victoria, getting ready for my talk. And, I'll be getting some interviews and insights from the people down in Melbourne in Victoria. Can't wait to see you all there. Until then, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.